Oh, I'm doing all right. Looking forward to seeing this race of well, I mean, let's call them what they are. They are Titans in Dragon Warrior. Both are very skilled and have been doing very well in previous tournaments. Have run into some of our newcomers who have been doing very well themselves.
And we are underway here as we have both a silver harp and an extra magic key to start things off. But a quick look at those statistics shows that our racers are in a little bit of a trouble to start here. So just some quick information for those of you who might be unfamiliar with Dragon Warrior Randomizer as we'll pause here. MisterHomes picks up the Stones of Sunlight, the Fighter's Ring, the Herb, and Erdrick's Sword in the Treasury. My goodness.
Now, there's a big money item for you that you just have to love finding in the Treasury, especially when you start out with 2 keys.
Absolutely. So a veritable bounty here between the throne room and the treasury, several key items, as well as the most powerful sword in the game, Erdrick's Sword. And it looks like we'll be off to the races here pretty quickly as MisterHomes has defeated a Magidraki to pick up level 2 already.
Wow, and 27 speed on that first level.
Good grief. Well, that's good because those starting statistics at level 1 were very poor. And here we are, Tristal and MisterHomes picking up levels simultaneously. MisterHomes 28, 9, and 9 along with the spells of Hurt and Repel.
Well, don't think we'll be seeing the Hurt and Repel spell used anytime soon, and well, don't think we'll be seeing Hurt used, period, not when they start with a sword. And we're going to see level 3 coming up along with 4 on our respective players' sides there, and wow, that power increase.
So a very quick swamp walk for MisterHomes to recover his health and magic points, heading back to Tangential. Yeah, and we're going quite quickly here in the early going. It's always difficult to say whether or not a seed will go very quickly or not just inside the first 3 minutes or so, but certainly this is off to a very quick start.
Yeah, usually when when we say we're off to the races, it's not quite like this.
So, while our racers gather some quick levels in the early going here, again, a quick rundown for those who might not be as familiar with Dragon Warrior Randomizer. The program randomizes the world map, enemy locations, enemy spells and abilities, as well as the contents of the different treasure chests, and the stock of the different weapon and armor shops, as well as the time at which spells are learned and the statistical progression. Other components such as the layouts of the towns and caves themselves and the equipment pricing, those aren't randomized. So our runners will have to get experience levels and equipment in order to collect certain key items, those being Erdrick's Token, the Stones of Sunlight, and the Staff of Rain, in order to obtain the Rainbow Drop, in order to use that to access Charlotte Castle in an attempt to defeat the Dragon Lord and return peace to Alefgard. While I was talking there, Tristal has picked up level 5, and MisterHomes likewise picking up level 5, kind of a weak level, but did pick up the spell of Stop Spell, which may come in handy a little bit later on.
Yeah, 3, 0, 0, and 2. That is what we have affectionately dubbed the MTI levels, as MTI loves seeing 0 stat gains and 0 spell gains. Ooh, and MisterHomes is going to meet a unfortunate end to a green dragon with Dragon Lord 2 breath.
And that's definitely not optimal. We've got a lot of swamp around here. The HP is still a little bit low at level 5, of course. But no means of healing yet at this point. But of course, when it comes to Dragon Lord breath, anything under about 70 HP isn't going to be safe anyway.
Oh, we do have level 6 on Tristal's side. And we'll see 3 power, 3 speed, 9 HP, and 1 magic. So no new spells and not that HP boost we're looking for either.
So Mr. Holmes finds the Vanilla Stones of Sunlight Cave, and that chest contains an herb. So at the very least, a little bit of healing in the early going here.
Oh, and wolves with hurt more as well. So we got a quick and fast start with having the Urgix Sword, the Harp, and the Stones of Sunlight in the just-in Tantagel. But some of our mid to late game enemies looking not so friendly.
Yeah, that's usually the case. Oftentimes you can see a quick start like that and you can say we're off to the races, but there's always going to be something in there that's going to throw a little wrench in the works, and we've seen that so far with some of the enemy locations that we've seen, the different zones, and then some of these enemies having powerful abilities to start with as well. Not to mention the swamp that seems to be surrounding Tantagel Castle on all sides.
And Mr. Holmes falling victim to that Dragonlord breath again. And we see Tristal does manage to exit the northeastern swamp, finds himself a Wraith Knight. Thankfully, he is able to take it out due to having Erdrick's Sword.
Yeah, definitely helpful in the early going, as long as those sort of mid-game monsters don't have any especially powerful abilities. If you have Erdrick's Sword, you can usually take them out in a couple of swings and manage to survive it. Tristal now picking up level 7, that's 1, 6, 0, and 7, along with a new spell. That'll be Heal More, so now some healing at level 7. Very important.
Well, having the Heal More spell at such an early level, with Erdrick's Sword, we can actually get some exploration done now and survive it.
Yeah, exactly. It makes those swamps much less difficult. After you cross through them, you usually only have enough HP to survive one attack, and you can get ambushed and die relatively quickly. But with that Heal More spell, that'll help buffer that out a little bit.
And it is always a debate, as we see our chat here debating it as well, on, with such a great start, do you just go straight for it? And wow, this double bridge we have over here. Do you go straight for the exploration, or do you sit there and grind out a few levels? In this case, it looks like Tristal sitting and grinding until getting Heal More actually did rather work out in Tristal's favor.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of different ways you can approach that. They obviously are hitting very hard here in the early going, but you see a little bit of a contrast of play styles, at least in this particular situation. Unfortunately, both runners now meeting their end to a Red Dragon and a Golem, respectively.
Well, so far, Mr. Holmes was the first to have found a town, but a Red Dragon said, "You shall not pass this bridge." And McGrew choosing to go with the Monty Python's reference with the Black Knight of None Shall Pass.
Just in time, as Tristal now runs into a Red Dragon and is stopped cold once again. So some of these enemy zones being very unkind here in the early going. Still a quick start, but not quite enough juice with the equipment and spells and stats that they have in order to handle any of those late game enemies.
Yeah, those Red Dragons, affectionately dubbed the Fun Police, as, well, when Red Dragons come about, the fun stops.
There you go. It's been stopped more than a few times for both racers combined by those Red Dragons, and here we have MisterHomes approaching a town nestled within a swamp here. It's Breckenary.
Breckenary usually its only benefit is the 6 gold in, especially when you only have 33 gold to use. There's a few decent items in the shop this time around, though.
Quite true. Now, we've seen the Tanagel Treasury, and there's no gold present there, but as far as I know, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think either racer has decided to visit the back staircase of Tanagel Castle yet.
No, actually, oddly enough, both of them, after having exited, even though they started with 2 keys, saw there was no gold to be had, they chose to just go with it. Now, what you could have done with having those 2 keys is ground enough gold up to purchase at least 1 more, and then you could have had access to both doors and checked what was in the basement.
Yeah, that's interesting, because even though the treasury didn't have any gold, if there's something in the basement of Tanagel Castle that does, then that would make an eventual gold grind a possibility. But we have not as yet seen what might be down there.
It is entirely possible that the basement of Tanagel has either Garenham's grave or it has the mountain cave. If it only contains Erdrick's tablet cave, that's only 1 chest that will not do it for you. But the benefit is if that 1 chest does have gold, you could still set up a grind that way.
Exactly. We have Tristal now coming across Breckenary as well. So exploration is roughly equal at this point. Both racers have seen the Stones of Sunlight Cave, both have seen Breckenary. So still very close here in the early going, just a slight experience lead for Tristal now, about 12 minutes in.
And Tristal will also go ahead and purchase a dragon scale along with, looks like a couple of torches, and maybe a couple of herbs as well.
That dragon scale's useful for 2 defense power. They're both also wearing the cloth armor. The agility, though, right in these early levels is probably above average, I'd say. 57 and 51 respectively at level 7 and 6.
Yeah, I would actually have to say, looking at our current stats, the attack power, of course, is well above what it would normally be due to having Erdrick's sword so early. But the agility is actually quite high. I mean, we're already seeing it turn orange. And when these stats turn orange is when it's like, well, you're getting ready to, go face Dragon Lord, but not quite there yet.
Right, and when you get into that range sort of in the 50s, that puts you in a position where you're at least a coin flip chance to run from anything except for those Armored Knights and Red Dragons, so presumably useful for exploration as well. So we've slowed down a little bit here. It looks like MisterHomes has settled in to grind a little bit, and he is going to pick up level 7 just now to catch up with Tristal. Tristal continuing to explore there just beyond that to the northeast, but a lot of these swamps, even with Healmore, you've only got 4 casts, so it doesn't get you very far.
Yeah, early on, the conservation of the MP, especially with Healmore taking 8 of those MPs in order to use it can go very quickly, and we've actually been seeing a lot of our seeds lately where the runners have been MP starved, to where you weren't grinding out those levels for the extra attack power, the extra HP. You were grinding levels because you were missing the MP to survive.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, and at any given time, any of these statistics can kind of be a bottleneck to your endgame situation. Your Tristal picking up his next level 170 and 8, so not a huge level, but did get some more MP there.
No, that'll give him at least 1 extra heal more.
Very useful. We didn't quite get to see the end of that peninsula before Tristal was stopped by that red dragon, but it was a very expansive swamp that he had to go through to get there. It'll be interesting to see if he decides to go back to just completely clear that map area, or what the next choice will be. So if you're just joining us, about 15 minutes in, we started off with a lot to find in Tangigal Castle, a couple of magic keys in the throne room, enabled them to access the treasury, immediately got the silver harp in the throne room, got the stones of sunlight and Erdrick's sword in the treasury, so a lot to work with to start off, and we got level 7 for MisterHomes, level 8 for Tristal, as they try to explore the map. We haven't actually seen that much so far, but Tristal now coming across a town that we have not seen before, and it's Cole.
That's actually a very important town, as it is one of the 3 searchable spots which can contain Erdrick's armor, and actually does contain it.
There we go. So now Tristal, just 16 minutes in, has both the best sword and the best armor in the game. Erdrick's armor, of course, beyond the best defense in the game that it provides. Also a slew of other benefits. It grants immunity to stop spell, as well as all those damage tiles like the swamps that the racers have had to walk through, so those are no longer a problem. The armor heals 1 HP per step, and it cuts by 1/3 the damage done by both the hurt spells and the breath attacks, so this is going to be really big for Tristal's exploration push here in the early going.
Well, good news for MisterHomes is he's only a couple of steps behind, so he'll be picking his up here in just a moment as well.
Yeah, this has been, they've just about been in lockstep so far. Even though Tristal has a slight experience lead at this point, it's rather negligible in comparison to late game experience, so it's a lead right now, but that could evaporate in a hurry later on. MisterHomes picking up his armor. So yeah, this has been very close so far.
Yeah, there's certainly been a number of times where we have seen an early game experience lead just evaporate due to choices of exploration, what they choose to grind upon. You know, if the Hawksness boss maybe not so favorable, somebody finds something that is more favorable, but that's where one of the two chooses to grind at. You know, you can easily, even if they're making more experience in Hawksness, catch up to them making less on faster fights somewhere else.
Very true, and we still do have these Red Dragon Guardians. MisterHomes getting away from one there. The late game enemies with this HP level will still be giving them some trouble, even though they have Erdrick's armor at this point, so that's something to watch out for too.
And we have a Sharlock sighting on Tristal's side, along with another cave to be explored. And there's MisterHomes finding it from the opposite direction.
So once again, just about neck and neck, and it's going to be Erdrick's cave, so Tristal will walk this without having to worry about any battles and see what he finds in that lone chest at the end.
Just a pair of wings this time. But
yeah,
those could be important wings if you don't pick up wings anywhere else and you're ready to go face the Dragon Lord before you learn Return. That could be your quick way back to the castle.
Absolutely. It can definitely be good for safety to hang on to a pair of those wings if you can. If you don't have the Return spell yet, you never know when those might come in handy. Of course, the chances are rather unlikely that our racers will find anything that they need in any given chest at this point, given that they already have virtually all of the key items, only looking now for Erdrick's token and the Staff Cave in order to obtain the Rainbow Drop. As Tristal enters a new cave here.
And the only other 2 items they would be able to locate in a chest that they would be looking for is potentially the Death Necklace, which in the vanilla game, it does nothing. It curses you and it makes the king not like you anymore. But in the Randomizer, it has a little extra benefit. At the cost of 25% of your health, it will give you 10 more attack power. And we've seen that where that Death Necklace has been a very pivotal item, allowing a runner to go at an earlier level and fight the Dragon Lord, whereas another runner who did not have it had to grind further levels.
And I do believe Tristal has just picked up Erdrick's token that looked like that was the Mountain Cave.
I want to say that was the grave.
I'm not actually sure. He made such a quick clear of it that I didn't really get to see in total what was there. Okay, so yes, that was the grave. And we have that gold chest and the wings chest. And the Erdrick's tokens, so now we just need to find the Staff of Rain Cave, and that basically takes care of all of the entirely necessary items that they'll need to find.
And we do have Tristal, speaking of necessary items, finding Remolder, which may be an important thing in order to find the Staff of Rain or the Rainbow Drop Cave. It could be locked in the Tangential Basement or in the back of Garenham.
MisterHomes trying to take on a Metal Slime there, but it bolts before he can get the chance. He has picked up level 8 as well, so now just about 50 experience separating the two runners, but Tristal, having explored that first floor of the grave, has a little bit of an exploration lead as MisterHomes gets sent back to Tanager Castle by that Stone Man.
And unfortunately, MisterHomes did actually catch a sighting of that cave that leads into the grave. Hopefully he will go ahead and run straight back to it, as any unexplored cave can certainly be where your missing items will be found.
Ooh, that's oh no, we didn't see that before, but the green dragon's also in possession of the spell of sleep, so MisterHomes gets the combo there, the sleep spell followed up by the Dragon Lord Breath.
That is the ultimate wombo combo, known as being slept and wrecked.
And you never like seeing that on any opponent. All it takes is an ambush and then you're done.
And Tristal getting punched by the golems a bit there, while MisterHomes is actually able to take out a knight, getting a decent amount of experience for it as well, for his trouble.
Yeah, that was a good fight there. Had to use up some of his resources with that heal more, but still got the job done and closed that gap that had started to form between the experience points. MisterHomes, I think, en route to where we saw that cave earlier that Tristal's already cleared.
And being noted in chat that we're still sitting at 40 HP since level 6.
Yeah, no advancement there at all, so still, any of the enemies that have Dragon Lord Breath or even Hurt More can be dangerous with that low of an HP total.
And Tristal going toe-to-toe with this Magiwyvern, using the last of his MP.
Oh no, but it has heal. Oh, but he gets in the last hit anyway.
Yeah, it looks like he did actually use Stop Spell to prevent that heal spell from,
oh yes, okay,
from going through. But as he is out of MP now, and he's facing a Metal Slime who has the Baby Breath. Not too fun to try and take one of those out.
Yeah, especially at this HP and MP level, there's a possibility that you could actually get taken out by a Metal Slime with Weak Breath.
And Trista going for the 1 in 16 chance hurt strats on the Metal Slime.
This Metal Slime seems to be out for blood.
Yeah, it's not running. That's uncharacteristic of a Metal Slime. It should have ran by now. And Mr. Holmes, who was behind in experience, will now actually take the lead at level 9. And there's a nice 15 HP and 24 MP increase.
So that's more like it with the HP and MP. So now up to 64 MP, which is 8 heal mores, and that 55 HP makes them a little less vulnerable to those powerful breath attacks.
And Mr. Holmes is going to go ahead and work on this Axe Knight. He does have the ability to take it down. He's just going to use a lot of those heal mores to do so, as Tristal also receives level 9.
You'll undoubtedly also be pleased to see those statistical gains there, picking up some of the weakest areas. So I guess it'll be interesting to see from here. Mr. Holmes now also in possession of Erdrick's token, and it looks like we've just got a lot of exploration to do. Try to find that Staff of Rain cave and try to find the Rainbow Drop cave, and still on trips back to Tanagel, no clue yet what might be in the Tanagel basement.
And Mr. Holmes saw another cave, and once again gets a sighting of a cave, and there's those red dragons saying no.
I feel like that has to be at least the third time that Mr. Holmes has spotted a landmark, a cave or a town on his map, and then before he could get to it was stopped by a red dragon.
That is 3 by my count, because they did it just outside of Rumildar when he was trying to go across the bridge. Or not Rumildar, the Breckenary. They did it just outside of the grave, and then did it once again outside of that cave.
Tristal making a trip back to Remulder to pick up a large shield. So that gives him a defense boost. Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, that is definitely a good option, especially seeing there's no gold in the treasury. The large shield is going to be the best you're going to be able to get. Usually you're not going to be able to grind your way to 14,800 for a silver shield just on fighting enemies. It's usually you get the gold grind in the treasury of Tanagel, and that's where you get your gold for it.
Definitely, and for our runners' sakes, if you manage to compile that much gold, it usually means you've had to grind to the upper teens or even into the low 20s for levels, so for their sakes, I hope that's not an outcome here.
It has happened a time or two where runner has been grinding away at enemies, whether it be either they were at such a low level when they started the grind, or they had to grind to such a high level that they were able to grind their way up to enough to go ahead and purchase that outright.
Definitely. So that is a possibility, but we'll see here now. Tristal making his way toward the Tanagel basement. Get our first look at what would be here. Looks like it's got to be Swamp Cave, and I think it's Swamp South.
Yep, I believe that it is Swamp South, and he's going to go ahead and use the outside spell, confirming it was Swamp South, as using outside will always exit you out the north entrance of Swamp.
So a very handy shortcut there, as Tristal will get a jump on this territory outside the vanilla north entrance of the Swamp Cave.
So yeah, this could both be either good or bad for Tristal if it happens that the Staff of Rain cave and the Rainbow Drop cave are on this continent, which we're going to see at least one of them, and it is the Rainbow Drop cave. That is information that he has that Mr. Holmes will not currently have. If the Staff of Rain cave is also here, then that gives Tristal a huge boost, as he can just go look for somewhere to grind, as he'll have collected all the items needed.
Precisely. So information can be almost as useful, if not more useful, than equipment at some points. If you've got that knowledge, you can basically map out how you want the rest of your game to look. And so far, Tristal's got that knowledge of where the Rainbow Drop cave is, so just needs to figure out where he can trade in that heart for the staff, and he knows he can get into Sharlock whenever he decides to do it.
The only thing that could work against Tristal in this case is if that was the only thing that's located that's useful on the other continent. We have seen very large continents where you go through the Swamp Cave and there's one thing to be found, and then you spend your time searching all of the rest of it just for naught.
Entirely true. We have here, I find it a little bit interesting, Mr. Holmes has decided to settle into this patch of desert north of Tanagel Castle, and it looks like he's trying to pick up level 10. Tristal's still exploring this second continent possibility and sees a town.
And speaking of grind possibility, we have Hawksness, where the boss here can also be used to grind upon, depending on what it is.
Not terribly far either from Tangential Castle through that swamp cave, so definite possibilities here. Of course, there is a search tile in Hawksness, but we've already picked up the two easily most important items that could be located on search tiles, those being the token and Erdrick's armor. So, at best, this search tile would contain the fairy flute, which may or may not be useful depending on the situation.
And we do have level 10 for MisterHomes. And 4, 6, 13, and 6. We do actually get a nice HP increase over on MisterHomes' side for level 10. No new spells though, so we're still looking for a Hurtmore to make grinding on some of those Axe Knights a little easier.
Exactly. So MisterHomes casts Repel here, so it looks like he's going to go explore now that he's got that higher HP.
And it looks like Tristal's going to go ahead and grind away on these metal slimes at 255 apiece. That is the maximum you can obtain from one.
Yeah, Tristal's heal walking here has been interrupted a couple of times by enemies, but most of them aren't doing enough damage to give him any difficulty, so we'll probably fill up here and then check that tile. And it looks like we've got an Axe Knight.
And Tristal instantly throwing a stop spell out at the Axe Knight, just in case he had something that he didn't like.
Yeah, that can be a very useful strategy if you haven't seen the enemy before. Unfortunately, it doesn't quite work out here. Wasn't able to apply the finishing blow to that Axe Knight. But yeah, that opening stop spell, if you haven't seen the enemy before, can sometimes just prevent an instant Hurtmore or something, or a sleep or something of that nature, and can be really useful.
That is actually good news for Tristal, though. Knowing where Hawksness is, knowing it's an Axe Knight, that is often one of the best grind spots you can have, as one Hurtmore will typically take him down. And it looks like MisterHomes has just found Remolder, so he'll be happy to be purchasing keys now.
So we'll see if this unlocks... I shouldn't have. I see, as soon as I said it, I realized what I did. We'll see if this unlocks anything for MisterHomes going forward in exploration, being able to pick up some keys here.
And speaking of keys, Tristal accidentally wasting a key there as he took one step too many heading to the basement of Tantagel, so he'll have to go back around, use another key, and try again.
Oh, I hate it when that happens. So MisterHomes, upon picking up those keys, immediately employs his wing and heads back to Tangential Castle, so we know he's going to make a beeline for that basement as well, and will probably be on his way to the second continent.
Seems like he's had enough of this first continent. With all the red dragons we've seen on it, I can't say I blame him. And a quick stop into Cantlin for Tristal, and right back out, as not really anything there he cares about.
Yeah, pretty much. We've now confirmed, since Swamp Cave is in the basement of Tangential Castle, there's no gold grind available, so he's got the best equipment he's gonna look for here, so Cantlin's not of much use in this particular scene.
And currently only 60 experience separating our runners. And both MisterHomes and Tristal kind of passing the lead back and forth there on the experience.
Yeah, they're really just doing a good job in their exploration of picking their targets of opportunity when they can and continuing to build experience as they go. So It'll be interesting to see how this unfolds. Tristal has a little more knowledge at the moment, but MisterHomes also, now through the Swamp Cave, could also find some of those locations quickly, and then we could be right back to essentially neck and neck where we've been for the entire race.
And speaking of knowledge, Tristal just got the knowledge that green dragons not only have the Dragon Lord breath, but they also have sleep, and doesn't want to play with them anymore.
Yeah, that was a very quick run after discovering that they also had sleep. Fortunately, it doesn't seem to be a high percentage on that sleep spell, but nevertheless, it's incredibly risky to have to deal with those unless you can land a stop spell, like Tristal does just there.
You know, even for the experience that green dragons give, unless I could confirm that that sleep was a high % chance of being cast and not having to worry so much about the Dragon Lord breath, I'm not sure I'd want to go against these guys.
Yeah, this is a pretty tough battle. He's already used a heal more here and might end up having to use another. Yeah, we got a Dragon Lord breath there, so that can be a tough battle even if you do manage to stop him from casting sleep.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those moments where you really have to kind of pick your battles.
So MisterHomes...
Go ahead.
MisterHomes discovering that there is nothing on that search tile, so no Fairy Flute for him this time around. He's going to try to pick up another one of these Axe Knights, though.
That means the Fairy Flute is going to be either on the world tiles that is searchable by finding the coordinates in Cantlin, or it will exist in a treasure chest somewhere, most likely not to be found.
Yeah, at this point, I would be shocked if either racer bothered with coordinates or even, frankly, opening another chest the rest of the game, unless it looks like the Death Necklace will be of use later.
Given our current HP of 68 at level 10, we'd have to see some very large boosts within the next few levels before we might even consider a Death Necklace being used.
Yeah, you never know. There can always be one of those mammoth HP gains at some point, but certainly at this juncture, it doesn't look like that's going to come into play.
And it does seem both Tristal and MisterHomes are convinced that the other continent is the way to go, as even after dying, MisterHomes makes a beeline right back for it.
MisterHomes locates Cantlin, and it's interesting, he is going to check the shop here. Interesting, the thinking behind that is, we've pointed out there's no gold grind available. It doesn't mean that Silver Shield is entirely out of the question, one never knows, but he is going to try to pick up a location where he can find one, I think. And he does see one there in that second locked shop, so he's going to immediately head back out of town.
I was thinking perhaps he might have been looking for a large shield, but I guess he wanted to find a silver shield, just in case that ever crops up as being possible. And I believe with that empty stretch of plains there, that aside from where the Rainbow Drop Cave is located, MisterHomes has explored all of the second continent, as we have dual level gains here for Tristal and MisterHomes. Unfortunately, a 3-1-2-3 level and no spell, so not much to be gained on that one.
No, not the kind of level that you want to see at this stage.
So, based on everything we have seen so far as caves and towns go, the only things we're still missing, if I'm not mistaken, is the Staff of Rain Cave and Garenham, which would mean the Staff of Rain Shrine is in the back of Garenham, and Garenham needs to be found.
Yeah, those are our last two landmarks, and of course, Garenham has that staircase behind the locked door in the back of town. So that's got to be where the Staff of Rain Cave is, because we've already seen each of the other caves.
And Mr. Holmes, interestingly enough, going for this red dragon here, he does take it down, so he'll receive a nice 255 experience point boost for his troubles. But that is a lot of heal mores that were used to do so. Perhaps he did it for the extra gold, as he does check a shop here before heading to the inn.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's possible he thought he saw that large shield in the first shop, but unfortunately not one there.
And Tristal have taken the long road around to the shop in Cole. Perhaps looks like he's going to get some torches and probably some herbs now as well. And I did see Mr. Holmes pass by a cave. Was that the exit for Swamp he passed by?
I'm pretty sure that it was.
And we have Mr. Holmes going for the stop spell and fight method against the green dragons now.
Yeah, that's always an interesting decision whether or not to fight those resource-intensive battles, but when you don't have the Hurt More spell yet, neither racer does at level 11, then sometimes that might be your only choice for a quick MP gain, so it's always a little bit of a balance. Do you want to try to find the enemies who give a little bit less experience, but don't cost you as many resources to fight, or do you want to fight something like those red dragons and green dragons and pick up some experience that way?
And speaking of some of those more easier enemies, Mr. Holmes does run into a knight, who is certainly easier and does still give 78 experience for your trouble. And that target number that we're looking for is going to be 3,000 for level 12. And hopefully we'll see either a nice large stat boost or hurt more is what I'm sure they are looking for to make their grind much easier against some of these enemies, such as the green dragons and the axe knights.
So just a quick recap now, coming up on about 45 minutes into this race. We got off to a very quick start with Erdrick's sword and the Stones of Sunlight found in the Tangible Treasury, as well as the Silver Harp in the throne room itself. And both racers were able to get out and get a lot of experience and some levels in a hurry. And since then, it's been smooth sailing in some ways and not so much in others. A lot of powerful enemies around and a lot of swamp to traverse, but Erdrick's armor and Erdrick with the sword obtained early. It's been a little of both sides of this so far for both racers. Really now we just need to find Garanham. That's the last outstanding landmark, because we know that there we'll have to find the Staff of Rain Cave so they can trade in that harp and finally be able to get that rainbow drop, as Mr. Holmes picks up level 12.
That is a 7010 level. But we do finally get that all-important Hurt-More spell. I always do a terrible job of pronouncing that. Hurt more, not Hurt-More. And as we see, Mr. Holmes using it to great effect in order to take out these Axe Knights much faster than he was before.
Yeah, no matter how you say it, that's obviously incredibly advantageous when it comes to Axe Knights, because a very high percentage of the time that Hurtmore spell will take out an Axe Knight in one shot, although we got a full Hurtmore there at 65, and it still didn't quite do the job, so we had to finish it off with a quick swing.
That is definitely always a disappointment, getting the max roll of 65 and can't take it out, and then we see a 60 there, does take one out, so that was probably a max HP Axe Knight on that one as well.
Yeah, they can have up to 67 HP, so there are two values at which even the max Hurtmore won't do the job, but most of the time, Hurtmore will get the job done.
The nice thing about the Axe Knights is, unlike Star Wyverns, the Axe Knights more often than not will be taken out by a single Hurtmore, whereas Star Wyverns, it's about a 50-50. And a question in chat: how did Tristal fall behind in the XP how did he fall so far behind in XP rather? Well, MisterHomes has been doing grinding while Tristal was doing exploration, so he's getting the exploration experience while MisterHomes is getting the fight experience. You know, I've seen both Tristal and MisterHomes step up to what looks to be the edge of a piece of land there. But you always want to, yeah, as MisterHomes does now, you always want to make sure you go all the way, because it could just be a single tile land bridge that takes you somewhere, or it could also be that single tile that has either the cave or the town you're looking for, and if you miss it, you're going to be looking all over the map until you recheck areas you've already been to in order to find it.
Yeah, it's always really important to take a look at all of those edges, because you never know, it looks like a peninsula or something might be tapering off, and then it turns out that it contains a bridge that then just leads to another large landmass, so always important to make sure you completely map out those areas.
Yeah, I know I've had that happen to me at least once, where I spent probably another 30 minutes researching the entire map, and then finally came across an area where I swore I explored it, and it was literally a single tile land bridge. And I mean, it just makes you want to kick yourself when you do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So being methodical and making sure you check everything out is of the utmost importance.
And we do see so far here, as it was a single tile piece of land that led to this forest, and then we have another single tile piece of land that's going to lead to some hills over here. So there have been plenty of these one tile land bridges leading on to further exploration. Unfortunately, a red dragon is going to get the better of MisterHomes this time around.
Yet another instance of MisterHomes, I think, seeing something that was a new area to explore and getting stopped by a red dragon.
I don't believe he had gone that way before.
Yeah, if we've seen that particular landmass, I think I missed it. So I'm pretty sure that's a new area, and I think he's headed right back there to try to figure that out.
Meanwhile, Tristal seems to either be convinced that must have missed something on the second continent, or wants to go back to Hawksnest perhaps and do some grinding.
Now it's interesting here, I think he might be getting ready to check this spike tile, because he didn't immediately outside.
Well, I mean, if he didn't find the Axe Knight to his liking, I'm not sure what else he could be looking for here other than, well, another Axe Knight. So that is certainly a closer Axe Knight grind, and starts it off with a nice Kaishin no Ichigeki to take it out.
And also pick up level 12. So, same grind, but a little bit closer. It's the least right there in the castle.
Yeah, there's definitely a more preferable grind, and we see another bridge leading, not quite a true spark over bridge, as it is not a single tile surrounded by either water or impassable tiles, but still a bridge nonetheless, and that must be Garanham for MisterHomes. So a huge find on MisterHomes' side here.
Yeah, this will absolutely be massive. I'm sure that he knows at this point that the Staff of Rain Cave is back there, so he has to be very pleased with this find. For the moment, he's still got a 500 experience point lead, but I think that will reverse pretty quickly here as Tristal continues hurt-mooring these Axe Knights.
Yeah, Tristal will certainly take over the lead here in just 2 more of these Axe Knight kills, but MisterHomes will now have his Staff of Rain being picked up. He will also have his Rainbow Drop should he choose to go get it, and then can go grind freely, while Tristal will still need to actually go and look for it. And we see gold, gold, and a key being returned. So we have a potential gold grind here. You get your key back, and you get 2 chests of gold. If you really wanted to, about 10 trips into Garanham would get you enough gold to purchase that silver shield. And actually, at his current gold amount, less.
Yeah, that's really interesting because MisterHomes, we did note, dropped into Cantlin and took a look at a couple of the shops specifically looking for a silver shield. We had already seen one in Cole, but if he decides, interested to see what he decides to do here. Nope, he's gonna throw the wings and head back to Tanagel.
It would only be a few minutes of his time to do so, but I can't say I blame him for deciding not to take those few minutes. Especially not with the startup we had where you had the Erdrick Sword to begin with, you had the armor not far behind it, so I can't blame him for not going for it.
For sure. It's always interesting talking to racers and asking them, at a given point, did you feel behind or ahead? And I think in this seed it'd be very easy to feel behind just because of how quickly it started. And if you happen to get some good run luck to get away from those red dragons, you maybe get a lot more exploration done more quickly than your opponent.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, seeing as how close Cole was to be able to pick up the armor, which gives you a huge defense boost to begin with, lets you explore much easier, and having the sword to start with, any time that you could see as not being necessary to use, not necessarily wasted, but just not necessary to be used, is certainly time you'd want to save.
So MisterHomes making his way back now immediately to the Rainbow Drop Cave, so he's going to pick that up and then presumably jump right into his grind as the experience points have about leveled out again. So this will be interesting to see unfold. MisterHomes, I would think, has a little bit of a lead at this point just because he has that Rainbow Drop already, and Tristal's going to have to go find Garanham.
And then also looking at, especially with as easy as it was to find the harp, the Stones of Sunlight, and the tokens. I mean, finding all of the items so quickly, you have to be thinking, your opponent's already on the grind. Like, oh man, I just found Garanham. They've got to be grinding already, which MisterHomes would be correct in believing, because that is what Tristal's doing. What he doesn't know, of course, is that Tristal has not found Garanham.
Tristal has picked up level 13, again, not super. Looks like 2 strength, 6 agility, 9 HP, not bad, and then another 8 MP, so MisterHomes now at level 13 as well.
I would say, which we see MisterHomes get as well. Not a bad level. I mean, 6, 9, and 8 on the on speed, HP, and MP is actually a fairly decent gain. The 2 strength, on the other hand, well, that's not doing them any favors, and that's an extra fighter's ring being put on.
And it's interesting here, we had sort of in those middle levels, 7 and 8, we were saying, oh, the HP looks a little bit low, but now we have some pretty good agility, some decent magic points, and okay hit points, but now the strength looks like it's a little bit on the low side, only 59.
And
That
the
said,
real interesting thing here is this is a strength HP build that both runners are going with, but their agility is the first thing that they're getting into the green zone, which is where you want to be before going to face the Dragon Lord.
yeah, we've seen a couple of these upside down statistical happenstances lately where you'll be running strength HP and you'll end up with a lot of agility and MP, so you never really know how that's going to work out until the seed starts to unfold.
And I have to say, I find it interesting. Tristal went ahead and went to Cantlin after running out of MP on his grind. I would have to think the walk all the way over to Cantlin and then going back through the Swamp Cave would be much slower than just taking the death, getting your MP and HP restored by dying, and going back to the swamp.
Yeah, that's an interesting decision. I would think a Death Warp would be the typical tactic there. That said, maybe he's intending to head off on some more exploration, but he's headed back into the Swamp Cave, so I guess we'll see what happens. This is interesting too, Tristal choosing to use the spike tile in the Swamp Cave to grind these Axe Knights, whereas when MisterHomes wanted to refill, he walked all the way over to Cantlin, used the inn, and then came back to Hawksness, so it's a little bit more of a walk for him. Level 14 inbound here for Tristal, 3 power, 5 speed, no hit points, and 7 magic points. So another completely empty, I should say, HP gain for level 14.
Yeah, we have seen, I want to say about 4 or maybe somewhere between 3, 4, 5 levels that have been 0 HP now.
Yeah, definitely feast or famine. I have at least 4 written down here, so... Alright, so we're definitely in grind mode here, both MisterHomes and Tristal, taking on Axe Knight Spike Tiles just in separate places, MisterHomes in Hawksness, Tristal in the Swamp Cave. Coming up on about the hour mark here as MisterHomes picks up level 14 as well and sees that disappointing no HP gain. We've had a relatively quick seed here, a lot of key items, and the Erdrick Sword picked up within the first couple of minutes in Tanagal. But right at the moment, we see Tristal's got about 6,100 experience as he takes his Death Warp. MisterHomes is hot on his heels, but MisterHomes has one thing and as a definite advantage right now. That is, he's located Garenham and has been able to trade his heart for the Staff of Rain, so he's already obtained the Rainbow Drop, whereas Tristal still has some exploration to do in that regard. This race, of course, is important for both of our competitors here today, having implications for their tournament lives. They both are sitting with records of 2-2. MisterHomes has chalked up wins against WMD88 and Schubinator, and has lost to Angry Larry and Zarnax 42. All of those races were close, but the losses in particular, loss to Angry Larry was only by about 3 minutes, and loss to Zarnax by exactly 1 minute. So MisterHomes definitely has been in all of his races, but only has 2 wins to show for it. Tristal likewise has had very close races. Each of his races decided by a margin of 10 minutes or less, losing to Nest Cardinality and Ouija Wee, and defeating Captain Green 7 and Schubinator as well. So the winner here today will guarantee themselves a place in that first elimination round in the tournament phase after this last Swiss round. But the other competitor will have to participate in that play-in race coming up next week.
And you know, to be fair, looking at a lot of our runners that are in that play-in race, I'm actually glad I'm not in it. I mean, I have myself made it into the brackets, but there's a lot of the tougher opponents that are in that play-in race.
I've heard it said so many times already and said it myself, but this tournament field is just so deep that every time you see the matchups released, it's almost like you say, oh goodness, I have to play them. I don't think the play-in race will be any exception. That's going to be very hotly contested. We actually have a race coming up later tonight that will determine whether or not there are 4 or 5 berths coming out of that play-in race. So that'll be interesting to see as well, exactly how many get to advance. Just a lot of stuff coming up here as the 5th Swiss round comes to a close in this tournament. Or yes, thank you for that correction, Tilo. It's actually 3 or 4 berths. I think I said 4 or 5 when I was mentioning it before. The race in question is coming up at 9:30 p.m. Eastern this evening. That's Up to NG, one of the last remaining undefeated racers in the tournament, facing off against Silverfire, who will be at 3-1. So that race will determine whether or not there are 3 or 4 berths coming out of that play-in race, as Tristal picks up level 15 and 18 hit points to go along with it.
Well, we finally see a nice large HP increase, and that does get us over the minimum HP threshold required to survive against the Dragon Lord. But I'm seeing a very large problem here. We are at level 15, but our attack power with Erdrick's Sword and the Fighter's Ring is only 107. So we are very short on the attack power required.
Yeah, they'll not be happy to see that strength score at level 15. It certainly, at this stage, doesn't look like the Death Necklace could possibly come into play unless we get a couple of really big HP gains. So we're at least 20, at very minimum, 20 strength away from being in a position where they could even think about it. And they would need to have a lot of HP and MP and other statistics in order to make that a consideration.
And MisterHomes will be just a couple more kills away from reaching level 15 himself. And as you're sitting with seeing that 65 strength at level 15, and knowing that at level 15 it now becomes 2,250 per level gain, especially on those Axe Knights, it's definitely a much tougher grind now.
So to continue as our players resume their grind here, There's another match on tonight's schedule as well. That'll be Will Wagner Music against Synth Pop is Back, coming up at 10 p.m. Eastern. That'll be an elimination match. Both racers at 1 and 3. So the winner will gain one of those spots in the play-in race, and the other will be eliminated from the tournament. One thing that I don't know that we've mentioned so far, just now that I look, is the sprites. I think MisterHomes is using a goof-off there.
Yes, that is the male goof-off sprite from Dragon Warrior 3.
And we'll get a look at Tristal again at the moment. I believe that's a hero sprite. I want to say 4.
It's either the heroine from the female hero. Well, not female heroine. There is no such thing as male heroine. It's either the heroine from Dragon Warrior 4, or it might be the Dragon Warrior 2. The Hangry Connect saying yes, that is the heroine from Dragon Warrior 4.
There we go. So the grind continues here. It's always difficult to tell how long the sequence will last. That last level in terms of strength was not very encouraging. They'll need quite a bit more in order to make their Charlock dive, so we'll see how this goes.
And Tristal will be approaching level 16 very quickly here now. Only about another 400 to go, as 9750 will be that target experience level. And being noted in chat that Tristal does have the better grind spots, as it's much quicker for him. As it's much quicker for him to go between restoring resources and fighting these Axe Knights than it is for MisterHomes. But Tristal does still need to search around and find Garanham in order to get that Staff of Rain, so that he can go and get his Rainbow Drop. And we do see a nice HP and MP and Strength increase on that. 11, 12, and 15 respectively there.
So creeping closer, but definitely 17 I think is going to be necessary here.
Oh yeah, I would definitely have to say 17 is still going to be required. They're only going to be, at this point, should they go after the Dragon Lord, at 16 doing 4 to 9 damage per hit. So not quite what you want to see.
Yeah. So with that in mind, I would think they'll probably continue grinding at minimum to 17. It'll be interesting. I guess there's also the possibility that they could start a dive and try to take another level on the way down, but that's always kind of leaving a lot to chance. If you don't pick up much in that level, then it's been, you might find yourself falling behind if your opponent's chosen to continue grinding. But Tristal does still need to find Garanham, so it's possible he wants to get that out of the way first, and that's going to allow MisterHomes to catch up on the experience here a little bit.
Yeah, it looks like Tristal's decided that he's done with his grind for the moment. 16, it's good enough. Maybe he's going to see if he can find his staff, get his drop, and then maybe he's going to see if he can get the level on the way down, as that is certainly viable. The HP and MP is there. It's just the strength stat that we're looking for now.
And as you mentioned before, it's probably really difficult at this point not to feel behind, just because of the way that the race opened and sort of the way it's gone. So, and definitely they both know that each are fantastic racers, so it's possible here, I think, that Tristal feels behind and thinks he needs to go pick up his items and then maybe take a shot at 17 on the way down is going to be the ticket.
It's definitely an option, especially as we see he's still using Hurt Moors on any Axe Knights, and then these green dragons he finds along the way as well. And meanwhile, Mr. Holmes is only about 400 shy from catching up to Tristal, but we'll have to go back and recover his resources before he can venture on his grind some more. So what really depends on how this is going to go is when Tristal finds Garanham.
Yeah, that could very easily be the determining factor when it comes to who ends up winning this race.
Whichever the outcome may be, I'm sure both of these runners will certainly watch the VOD back to see what the other did, especially in the case of the whoever wins. Should it be Tristal, I'm sure Mr. Holmes will watch it back, or if Mr. Holmes wins, I'm sure Tristal will watch it back, just to see, what did my opponent do that got them ahead of me. And if it does turn out that Tristal wins over Mr. Holmes, he'll see that, oh, well, he checked the swamp tile. Wow, I wish I'd have done that. I could have had this. And that's something that a lot of us will do, is we'll rewatch our races, whether we won or lost the race. We'll rewatch them, see what did our opponent do, and it makes you think about, oh, that's not something I thought about. I need to make sure I do that next time. And it makes everybody, whether you're, Mr. Holmes, who's sitting on top of the leaderboards, or, you're the person on the bottom of the leaderboards, it still always makes everybody better.
Definitely, and I know a lot of the spectators who come to watch the races get a lot of information out of that too, just by seeing what other runners do, as Mr. Holmes picks up his next level here, level 16.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I started playing this, wow, it's getting close to a year. 3 months 3 months from now, it'll have been about a year since I started playing the Dragon Warrior Randomizer. And I started playing it after catching the end of last year's normal tournament. And I hadn't played Dragon Warrior Vanilla in 15 or so years, and had never played the Randomizer. But I picked up so much just from watching it that I was able to go in, and my first one I did, it was about a little over 2 hours, I think. And I still learn things even now, but I keep learning things along the way.
Yeah, there are just so many things, big and small, from a strategic perspective, different decisions you can make, things that you maybe didn't even know existed. I remember watching a race toward the beginning of the tournament, and I was completely unaware of how you could activate the chest glitch if you had multiple keys in the beginning, if you went back up and saved. So there's always something, even something like that, or some little tactic that you can pick up that can really help improve your game as you watch. So as a racer, definitely I can see the advantage to going back and checking out what other people were doing during a given race.
Yeah, that is definitely one I was not aware of until I saw it happen. And I've actually had the opportunity to take a chat with McGrew, the creator of the Randomizer, who has a little bit better an understanding of how that actually works. We actually had that opportunity in this particular race even, which Tristal chose to go ahead and do, whereas Mr. Holmes decided to just go straight to it, get what was in the treasury and go. And the way it actually works is the developers, when you first start in the throne room, you have your 8 chests, and they each have a slot. You have slot 1 through 8. The first time you're in there and you open the chests, it takes up slots 1, 2, and 3. Anytime after that you enter the throne room, the chests automatically get put into slots 6, 7, and 8. And so that's why it works, is when you re-enter, you already had the chests in slots 1, 2, 3. Those stay locked in because you don't go to the world map. So when you re-enter, it puts them in 6, 7, 8, leaving only 2 more chests which is going to be slots 4 and 5 to be filled. And that's what the developers did to make sure that those chests always stayed locked, was every time you re-enter the throne room, those chests get put in the slots 6, 7, 8.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and that's the exact sort of thing that you would never really find just by playing on your own unless it was a total accident.
Well, to be fair, I mean, the developers also never meant for you to have more than one key. You get the one
Also
key
true, yes.
to, you know, I guess teach you, oh, keys open doors, okay. You know, and then that's it. And we see MisterHomes is going to be going back to Cantlin, just a little shy of hitting level 17, and only leading by about 600.
If this race ends very close, I think it'll be interesting just the walk that MisterHomes has to take from Hawksness all the way back to Cantlin to top off that MP again. That could have a pretty big impact as we move forward here.
Especially as we see MisterHomes is actually making his way to Cantlin, whereas Tristal is making his way back to his grind. And purchasing a couple of keys, because he was running low. So yeah, that experience lead that very slightly that MisterHomes has is going to be able to be quickly taken care of here.
As we see, Tristal just had to warp back to Tangential and then enter the basement to get into Swamp Cave, whereas MisterHomes is going to have to bypass Swamp in order to go all the way back to Hawksness.
I gotta say, that excellent move on that golem there, giving 255 to MisterHomes. That's certainly a nice boost for him, and
and here we go.
He's gonna go check this white tile now.
I think he is going to check it. So one thing we mentioned earlier in the race that might be coming back here, as we see it's been quite a while since either competitor has had to take a death, so their gold is actually sitting over 9,000 for both of them. If this grind ends up protracted because they can't pick up the strength that they need, it's entirely possible that they'll get the gold that they would need for a silver shield by the time it's all said and done.
And this is actually interesting. Now that we actually have Holmes and Tristal both on the same grind spot, and oh, that 13 power plus another 11 really HP, big. That's it. That is straight for Sharlock and go.
A quick check of the stats, and MisterHomes is going to make his way out. So here we go. Now Tristal only about what 2 Axe Knights away from picking up level 17 himself. So this could be right down to the wire.
And even with the advantage that Tristal has of having a large shield, it's only an extra 6 defense points, or defense power rather. You're still at 82 at level 17, so the Dragon Lord's hits aren't going to be as bad. And MisterHomes still might even pick one up here as he goes. Looks like he's going to go take a rest at the inn that's closest to Sharlock, and then go for it.
So MisterHomes getting ready for his dive. Tristal now has just picked up level 17. He's almost certainly going to see his stats immediately and head the same direction.
That is one of those moments where you have to wonder, it's like, wow, how much further along could I be if I, was just grinding this level on my way down? Personally, I want to see a within 3-second finish here. And some of the people in chat might know exactly why.
Would we have to then implement the sudden death procedure?
We would finally get to implement the sudden death. And I want to see it. I want to see it one race.
Well, it definitely looks like either way we're in for a really close conclusion here, as Mr. Holmes has started in on the first floor of Charlock, and Tristal is on his way as well. Now with this agility, both at 97, even the Red Dragons and Armored Knights, they're slightly better than a coin flip chance to run away from them. So depending on the enemy groups, this could be a pretty quick Charlock.
If they're lucky, they won't have 3 straight floors of Red Dragons and Armor Knights. I did have that in one of my previous runs today, and oh man, was that a pain.
Yeah, that's definitely problematic. The Green Dragons themselves could be a little difficult if they manage to land sleep, so that's also a problem. But so far as the Charlock enemies that we've seen so far, I don't have anything written down that would indicate they would necessarily be any more problematic than usual.
Yeah, Green Dragons doing the old sleep ambush would be troublesome. I don't think we've actually seen Blue Dragons until just now. And you were just mentioning those little better than coin flips as Tristal gets barred by a Red Dragon, this time from leaving Breckenary.
Yes, probability does not necessarily indicate success.
And Eternal Newbie expressing disbelief at 97 agility and can't run from a Star Wyvern. I mean, it happens.
It does. That's quote-unquote fun when you've just, successfully run from a couple of straight Armored Knights or Red Dragons or something, and then you get blocked by a wizard 3 straight times or something, and as I say it, Tristal tries to run from her wizard and gets stopped, so I take full responsibility for that one.
And Mr. Holmes was doing an excellent job of navigating Charlock in the dark, but got caught up on a corner and decides to go ahead and use Radiant here. Yeah, I can actually account for plenty of times where some of the Zone 0 and 1 enemies, such as Red Slimes and Drakeys, Magic Drakeys, have been known to bar you from running. And you're at 90 plus agility. It's like, really? Really? A slime?
Yeah, at that point you're into the fraction of a percent of a chance to be stopped by such an enemy, and then you see it, and just like, what on earth is going on here? But now Mr. Holmes is in the basement, and he's had a pretty clean run to this point.
Well, we'll see what our Guardian is here. And it will be a Red Dragon barring his way to get to the Dragon Lord. Honestly, I don't like percentages. I will talk about percentages all day long, but I don't like them. And the reason I don't like them is because a very famous line, and that's, so you're saying there's a chance. If I have a 5% chance to miss, so you mean there's a chance?
Mr. Holmes declines the Dragon Lord's offer and is declared a fool, and he'll begin his fight with a 41 and a stop spell, so a pretty good beginning. And then another stop spell. So clean through Dragon Lord 1 and on to Dragon Lord 2. And very interesting to see Tristal making his way toward the treasury.
Perhaps looking for the flute just in case it's there? I don't know. certainly something to ask him about in the interview. I know I've had plenty of times where the flute does appear in the treasury, and then the golem does block my way, and I've chosen not to go to the treasury, and, well, kind of wished I had.
It is a possibility. He did pick up one chest and then immediately left again, so now he's on his way to the boss tile as MisterHomes continues his fight. He's been getting some relatively low rolls here. That was another 8.
Alright, so...
This is going to be pretty close. MisterHomes now on 3 Healmores left. Or pardon me, 2. Certainly have seen a fair few low rolls here. This is his last Healmore, so he's got a couple of swings left. And that gets the job done. MisterHomes, first out of the Dragon Lord 2 battle. We'll see what his time is and then see what kind of time Tristal can turn in. This is certainly going to be a close race, but get your GGs out in chat for MisterHomes. Ran a very nice race there today and brings home the victory. He's going to finish in first place with an official SRL time of 1 hour, 26 minutes, and 56 seconds. So MisterHomes has earned himself a guaranteed spot in that first elimination round as we head into the second phase of the tournament. Boy, that was about as neck and neck over the course of a race as you might possibly see. And this is going to come down to a matter of just a couple of minutes. A very exciting race here and a very well-run race by both competitors, but MisterHomes coming out on top in this one.
I mean, honestly, I can't say any mistakes were made by either runner. Both had very solid decision-making on their exploration, on their grinds. I really can't criticize anything that was done here.
Yeah, sometimes it just comes down to that sequencing, what happens when. We saw that Red Dragon stop Tristal as he was getting ready to make his dive. Any number of very little factors just on those razor-thin margins in a race like this just compile to cause that sort of a circumstance. So, very clean race overall for both competitors, and you can get your GGs out in chat as well for Tristal, coming in here with an official SRL time of 1 hour, 29 minutes, and 8 seconds. We'll see if the racers will stop by for a chat with us. So again, just a quick recap of tonight's schedule. Keep an eye out on the Randomania networks. We've got 2 more races coming to you tonight. I'm not quite sure as far as Randomania scheduling, but I do know that Up to NG and Silverfire will be taking place at 9:30 p.m. Eastern, as well as Will Wagner Music versus Synth Pop is back in an elimination match at 10 p.m. Eastern. Battle of the Bands perhaps there. So still a couple of matches coming up tonight, and I think we're awaiting MisterHomes and Tristal coming by to join us here in just a few minutes. And we'll welcome MisterHomes into chat right now. GG, great race. Really came down to the wire there. What were your general impressions of that seed?
I was terrified. It was kind of tricky to get out of the starting zone, and there were no really good mid-game enemies that I found right away. And when I realized there were specters and one other enemy just north of the starting castle, I was a little bit scared. So I was very unsure of my standing throughout most of the race.
Yeah, we were talking about that with the quick start and all of the items that you found in Tanajol and having the sword right away. It probably is pretty easy to feel behind at most stages just because of various circumstances, getting sent back by red dragons and so forth.
Yeah, it was tricky. Like, it was at the same time, there were so many little deadlock areas that I had to feel that Tristal had hit them as well. So I didn't feel super behind, but just really unsure what I should be doing.
And we have Tristal now joining us in chat as well. GG to you as well, sir.
Yep, GG and well done, MisterHomes.
Thanks, buddy.
So what did you make of that start, Tristal? A lot happening there in the early going, but a lot of swamp kind of hemming you in for the first, say, third of the race there.
Yeah, I mean, the first 10 minutes were incredible, and then the second 10 minutes were completely garbage for me. Just trying to explore with the 6 herbs I got in the treasury and just really couldn't make any progress. Took way too long to find coal. Passed right by it on my first trip up there and just didn't see it, or wasn't on my screen at all. Just needed to move over a couple tiles to see it, I think. And not having Erdrick's armor probably was the difference that early. Also, not finding Garenham until really late was kind of unfortunate for me.
Yeah, that sounds pretty similar to my experience. I'm not sure if they've tracked it, but it would be curious to see how close we were to getting the armor, because I have a feeling it wasn't too far apart.
Didn't keep an exact count, but actually for the longest time, up until when you located the swamp cave in the basement of Tantagel, as you found Remolder, Tristal, you and MisterHomes were actually running right behind each other within maybe a minute or two.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, that's pretty par for the course for us.
Oh man, so you may feel bad for wishing me Char luck, although it was kind of back and forth, but I had the longest no encounter walk of my life. I think I got an encounter 2 steps into the final zone, and then I went through the rest of that floor, the short next floor, and all the way up to the desert without getting an encounter. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I did get, I had some lucky moments in Charlock. It only took me 1 dive. I made a really stupid blunder trying to go to the treasury because I didn't think I had Fighter's Ring yet. And Fighter's Ring with my current power would have been really huge. Like, it would have made a I'm probably going to win this fight into I'm definitely going to win this fight. But turns out we got the Fighter's Ring within the first couple of minutes, and I totally forgot about that.
I've made plenty of errors like that, so I don't blame you at all.
Yeah, I have to say, go ahead, Archfiend. Or Archfield, sorry.
That's okay. I think we're probably going to express a similar sentiment, which is when you pick up that much that early, it can be really easy to just forget what you do have after about an hour and a half.
I mean, we did kind of speculate. It's like, what could he be going to the maybe fairy flute in case of golem?
Yeah, didn't do that. Just being dumb. I take it then Fairy Flute wasn't in Hawksness, because Hawksness was potentially killable. I had some bad luck there with the X Knight, but luckily there were X Knights damn near everywhere else to grind on.
Yeah, it was really interesting. Tristal, you chose to check out that Swamp Spike tile much sooner than MisterHomes did, and so you were grinding the Axe Knights there earlier, and MisterHomes, you were grinding those Axe Knights in Hawksness for quite a while, so it was interesting to watch that back and forth as well.
Yeah, that was something that was weighing on my mind quite a bit. And there aren't many places I can't navigate in the dark, ignoring my little bonking around on the second floor of Charlock. But I have a lot of difficulty navigating to the swamp tile in the dark. And I didn't have a torch, and we didn't learn Radiant to level 16. So that was the first time I actually checked it out and just kind of fought that Axe Knight 2 times and then was ready to go.
Yeah, I ended up stopping by Cantlin, which was kind of right outside the North Swamp entrance for torches multiple times because I have the same issue. I think I've kind of learned a cadence for it, looking at how many steps you take. So maybe in the future I'll be able to handle it. But yeah, I think I used like 4 or 5 torches on North Swamp.
Yep. Out of all the caves, I had to say Swamp is probably the least favorite to navigate in the dark, at least when it comes to not just going straight through the cave. When you go towards the princess, I hate those twists and turns there.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I was gonna say something, but I completely forgot. I blame Ryu.
Why not? Everyone does.
Did you kill any metal slimes?
No, I got 2 hits on about 6 of them.
Yeah, I didn't kill any either, so don't feel too bad about that then.
I even tried running from one.
Yeah, I almost died to one. I did have Edric's armor at that point, so the baby dragon breath wasn't doing very much. But yeah, just having lots of trouble with them and absolutely no benefit to them in my run at all.
I have a feeling we pretty much played this seed like clones, and it was just like subtle RNG that made the difference in this one.
Yeah, you call it RNG, I'll call it skill, and we'll just leave it at that, I guess.
Well, RNG or skill, that was definitely a very close race. Do either of you have anything else you'd like to add before we start to wrap things up here?
I don't know. Like, I really feel like I need to analyze this after the fact, because there is really sometimes a really hard decision at the beginning when you get weapons and attack power, but you're kind of hemmed in like you are. And it's like, when do you really leave and when do you just sit around the start and just punch stuff and just say, okay, I'm beat? I really don't know if I made the right decision with that.
Yeah, my only comments are good luck, MisterHomes, in the bracket. I will hope to see you there. The play-in race is pretty gnarly. I did the math a little bit earlier. I don't know exactly how the pair-ups and pair-downs have worked their way through so far this round, but it looked like it was something like 3 out of the 13 runners would advance, something like that. So it's going to be pretty crazy.
Yeah, it will be 3 or 4 on the basis of who wins actually the next matchup coming this evening, which is the Up2NG Silverfire contest. Will determine whether or not it will be 3 or 4. So that play-in race is definitely looking like a difficult go.
Yeah, we were discussing that a bit, saying that play-in race field is none too fun to be in. I don't envy anybody who is in it, and am very glad to be in the brackets instead.
Yeah, no kidding. One thing I can say is both Tristal and I have had really, really rough pairings. Tristal had to play me and Ness Cardinality. I had to play him and Zarnax and Larry. It's just been unfortunate, we'll say.
Yeah, I mean, there's been so many runners that have just come out of nowhere, and some people I haven't even ever raced even once. You know, I still say I've never once beaten you, and I still have to look forward to that in the bracket stages as well.
Get me some tequila and we'll make that happen.
Does it have to be the good stuff?
Eh, whatever. Jose Cuervo's good enough. Anywho, that's all for me. You can tell I'm getting really on a tangent, so that's probably time for me to shut up.
Yeah. On that note, now that we have a proven strategy to defeat MisterHomes, we're going to start to wrap things up here. So again, tonight on Randomania Networks, we have 2 more matches, one at 9:30, one at 10. So keep an eye on the schedule for that. Thank you both for being with us today for this interview. After chatting, great race again. All right, so Reeve, do you have anything else to add?
No, I think that's about it. Look forward to seeing how the rest of the bracket's going to fill out, and wondering who it is I'll be going up against. As I said, don't envy anyone in the play-in race, but those who didn't, those who made it to the bracket stage, well, don't really want to play against any of them either.
Yeah, I don't think there are any easy races left at this point, if there ever were to begin with.
You know, honestly, I'm not sure there were.
So with that, that'll about wrap things up. I do want to thank our restreamer MathGirl718 and our tracker Tyrannex for doing a fantastic job today. And on behalf of my co-commentator Ryu Station, thank you all for being here. Take care and tempt not the fates.